Welcome to Muller UN seminar focusing on sustainable development. These are the flipped activities for week 3. The theme is developed and developing countries. What are the differences? This may be a bit surprising, but there is actually no official definition of the difference between developed and developing countries. In the United Nations system, this is what you can read. There is no established convention for the designation of developed and developing countries or areas in the United Nations system. In common practice, and then they keep going. This means that no established convention, so there is no clear rules about how one can designate, can name a developed or developing countries. So they are relying on common practice, what has been done in the past. There is no official definition of the difference in the United Nations system and elsewhere. A study done by Nielsen in 2011 shows that when it comes to classifying countries according to their level of development, there is no criterion that is generally accepted. Again, here classifying, so organizing, deciding which one is which. There is no criterion, so a clear standard, a clear definition that is generally accepted. We will use Nielsen's study to look into the definition of developed and developing countries. And it was a paper, a working paper, done in 2011 for the International Monetary Fund. Nielsen studied 3 international organizations. Let me introduce them. First, the UNDP. It's the United Nations Development Programme. The second organization is the IMF, International Monetary Fund. The third organization is the World Bank. The IMF, so International Monetary Fund, and World Bank are independent from the United Nations, but they work with the United Nations to help with the financing of development. So they are not the same, but they work together. On the other hand, the UNDP, as the name shows, belongs to the United Nations. So we have 3 organizations, 2 independent from the United Nations and 1 part of the United Nations. I have adapted Nielsen's results, and this is what we see. So let's start at the lower level. So for developing countries, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has 2 levels: low-income developing countries and emerging and other developing countries. In terms of developed countries, the IMF names them advanced countries. And we can see right away a difference with the UNDP. The UNDP has 3 levels for developing countries. The first one is low human development countries. The second one is medium human development countries. The third one is high human development countries. But let's keep in mind these 3 levels are for developing countries. The UNDP calls developed countries a country with a very high human development index. Right? So very high, not just high, very high. Last but not least, the World Bank follows the IMF with 3 levels, 2 for developing countries, they are called low-income countries. The second one is middle-income countries, and developed countries are called high-income countries. Giving names is one thing, but what really interests us here is actually the limit. what's the limit for a country to be considered developed or developing? Well, as you can see right here, it's either very vague to the point of actually not being explained. So the IMF does not explain how these countries are different. On the other hand, the UNDP and the World Bank, they do explain the difference, but they are not based on the same elements. The World Bank used the GNI, the gross national income, only. The UNDP uses the Human Development Index. The Human Development Index includes 3 aspects, 3 elements. It does include the GNI, like for the World Bank, but it adds longevity, meaning how long a person lives or can live from the time he or she is born. So for me, I usually understand longevity as the general level of health. Right? And so the Human Development Index includes the GNI, longevity or general level of health, and education. Here you have a table with the details of the Human Development Index for 2013. And as I said, life expectancy or longevity, how long someone can live from the time they are born. Then the mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling, meaning that this is the actual number of years that people go to school, but this is what the government expects. And yes, the GNI next, the gross national income per capita. As you can see, Japan is ranked number 17 with a 0.890 index. As we've just seen, the UNDP and the World Bank at least have a limit, but they actually don't quite clearly explain why $6,000 in terms of GNI per capita makes a country developed and why below it makes a country developing. Similarly, the UNDP has never explained why 75% of countries are developing and only 25% of countries are developed. I'd like to explain a bit more specifically what troubles me is that let's look at the Human Development Index for 2013, and we have Argentina, and Argentina is still considered a developed country, and its Human Development Index is 0.808. And then the next in line is Uruguay, and Uruguay has 0.790. My question is, why is that number, why is Uruguay considered developing and why is Argentina still considered developed? The UNDP has never explained that limit here, that threshold. Why is it? What makes it such a big difference when number-wise the difference is very limited? Before going back to Nielsen's study, I wanted to make it very clear that we've been using the 2013 Human Development Index. It's the most recent one available right now. But that Nielsen's study is based on 2010 data. So the number of countries considered developed in Nielsen's study is much lower than what we have nowadays. So if we look at the number of countries considered developed by the International Monetary Fund, the UNDP, and the World Bank, you may realize that there is quite a bit of a difference. For the International Monetary Fund, in 2011, we had 31 developed countries. For the UNDP, we had 39, and for the World Bank, 47. So if we look, they don't agree on who is developed. 9 countries are not considered developed by the International Monetary Fund, but considered developed by the UNDP and the World Bank. 7 countries are not considered developed by the International Monetary Fund and the UNDP, and just 1 country is not considered developed by the UNDP. So we have 3 important international organizations not agreeing on who is developed and who is not. Again, IMF 31 countries, UNDP 39, World Bank 47.